Hi everyone, this is Rob Ager of CreativeLearning.com. In this video we're going to explore the controversial character Trevor Phillips from the game Grand Theft Auto 5. Now this is going to be a fairly long video because in order to study a character you also need to explore a little bit of the context in which the character exists. So we'll be delving off into other GTA topics here and there. So for the impatients who are wondering whether it's worth sitting through this long video, I'll quickly outline here what to expect. First, I'll outline my personal playthrough experience of initially feeling repulsed by the character and how that repulsion gradually transformed into enthusiastic amusement and even respect for the character, or at least respect for how the character is written. I'll outline my interpretation of Trevor as a subjective mirror for the dark urges that exist in every human being, but which are usually suppressed in the subconscious. Now I know that one has been covered in some other studies of the game, but there are important aspects of that theme that I've not encountered elsewhere, and that stuff will be included later. After that, we'll explore the ways in which the writing of the character was actually restricted for the sake of decency. Then we'll explore ways in which the character parodies modern forms of acceptable bigotry. And finally, I'll outline how I consider the Trevor character to be a beacon of creative potential for how video games might actually be able to finally surpass movies at the level of character identification and engagement. Because up until I played GTA 5, I'd never felt significantly engaged emotionally or intellectually with a scripted, CG-rendered video game character before. And this was the first time I played a video game where I actually looked forward to watching the storyline cutscenes and enjoyed them as much as the gameplay. Now before we crack on with all that, let me just say that I'm not claiming other gamers all had the same experience as me, nor am I claiming that every interpretation or observation I make was intended that way by the gamers. Your experience might be different in places, but hopefully you'll still enjoy some interpretations of the character that you haven't previously considered. So let's get started. Trevor is first present in the opening robbery scene of GTA 5, but we don't get a proper introduction of him until maybe 15% further into the game's chronological storyline. At this point, the first thing we see of him is his impersonal and joyless sex with a drug addict chick in his trailer. He's verbally challenged by the woman's biker boyfriend, and without even being attacked first, he stomps the guy's head in and kills him. Now those of you who are familiar with my videos know that I'm definitely not into phony political correctness, and I often give praise to controversial movies that intelligently explore the darker side of the human condition, the things a lot of people are typically in denial of. But even I was pretty shocked at this unexpected Trevor scene, and I took an instant disliking to the character. The problem wasn't so much what Trevor did, as we see bad guys doing stuff like this in a lot of games and movies. The problem was that I was going to have to play through portions of the game as this character, and that was off-putting. Not being accustomed to game storylines having much in the way of subtlety, I wasn't properly paying attention, so I overlooked the fact that Trevor was annoyed about what he'd seen on TV and that he was trying to comprehend whether his supposedly dead friend Michael Townley was still alive or being impersonated. So his attack on the biker was partially an expression of his anger about that issue.
Next time, don't get in my fucking face! I just saw a fucking ghost and I gotta hear your crap! Get up! Get up!
And the violence here was also a setup for the tension between Michael and Trevor when they come face to face later. I also overlooked the underhanded humour of the scene too.
Don't do it, Johnny! Don't do it!
Trevor! You been with my girl again?
Been with my girl again? So he's done this before? And there's his male rape joke.
You want me to fuck you instead? Is that the problem here? Take off your pants, cowboy, all right? Let's fuck.
But we'll come back to the rape thing later because it's part of a larger theme of the character. And the fact that he continues shouting at the guy when he's obviously either dead or unconscious, which is akin to this classic dark comedy scene in the movie Scarface.
What do you think I am, huh? What do you think I am, a fucking worm like you? Why, you stupid fuck! Look at you now!
But something else important in this scene that I think is key to the general tension around the character throughout the game is that he fakes sympathy with his victim before he kills him.
I know.
messed up.
I know, cowboy. It's okay, man. Give me a hug, yeah.
That's quite unusual in fiction, and it establishes that Trevor is unpredictable, a violent time bomb that can go off anytime, any place. Any act of kindness or normality from him can't be trusted because it might just be another deceptive precursor to more violence. And this is reinforced in several follow-up scenes.
Come on over here, all right? I ain't gonna hit you.
I've been trying.
I know.
It's also reinforced in the fact that people who know him are constantly terrified in his presence. All he has to do is walk into the room and they're shaking in their boots. He's like the typical emotionally sadistic schoolbully who likes to keep his underlings in a constant state of fear. Plus he's got that mean, dark-eyed, square-shouldered, muscular physique. He's unshaven and needs a wash, and his initial costume is so utterly basic that he obviously doesn't care about the perceptions of others. No frills, so to speak. And at some points he runs around near naked, like a wild animal. Okay, so after his head-stomping scene, I was kind of thinking maybe the game's critics got it right, maybe this is just sensationalist game violence for the sake of it. But as more scenes followed, I had to hand it to the scriptwriters in that the dialogue and behaviour of Trevor was quite witty. I started giggling in places.
Well, you know, as a matter of fact, I just did, just 10 minutes ago. Yeah, I saw her on the end of this penis here.
Why don't we just ask him then, huh? Hey, cowboy, you mind that I fucked your old lady? You don't mind? Oh, because you're a dead man? And the only sentient part you left is this little bit of brain and the gristle on the end of my boot?
And there were little visual touches like when he punches this guy out twice and the guy comes close to smacking his head on a step. I wondered if that was deliberate to make it seem more threatening. His disgusting, filthy underpants were amusing too, him wearing a dress, and so on. So I started to reluctantly accept the character purely for the sake of bad taste humour. I also started coming gradually to the conclusion that Trevor's insatiable appetite for drugs, booze, sex, crime and violence was both an over-the-top performance for the gamer's amusement, and that it was bait to get pro-censorship critics frothing at the mouth to generate media discussion of the game and boost sales. It's quite similar to the character Alex in Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Trevor's actions are so out there that it's virtually inconceivable that a guy this rabid, this lacking in self-restraint, would be walking around freely in modern Western society for long. He's a criminal clown act, basically. This was a key scene that flipped the coin and made me start to actually like Trevor and look forward to more of his cutscenes. Just waltzing into a city ghetto and telling some homies he wants to be their buddy, and demanding to go commit whatever crime they have in mind without knowing what it is or how dangerous it'll be.
I'm fucking new in town. I'm making friends, all right? Now let's party.
My nigga, I just came over here to holler at you about the little thing.
Man, I said I'm tired, dawg.
What fucking thing? I love things. I'm the king of things.
I ain't talking to you, homie.
Hey, let's go do something about the thing, okay?
In a parallel I suspect may be deliberate, Trevor is led into the back of the van with the dog, like he's a dangerous animal too.
We shooting shit up, spraying some motherfuckers. I can drive by with the best of them.
Behave yourself, man.
Business. Hey, since we're out here banging, either you got some dust?
Fool wanna get butt naked?
I'll get wherever it takes me, homeboy.
Homie's crazy, man.
And then came for me what was the standout series of cutscenes for the whole game. Trevor finally tracks down Michael and his family. What we've seen of Trevor so far is mostly violence, and we're waiting for him to kill someone.
One of those fake your own deaths to your best buddy, and then run off with the dough, and then live in a big mansion. Awkward situations. It's one way of looking at it.
As usual, he has his poised to kill body language, but instead of attacking, his previously hidden sense of loyalty and friendship kicks in. He insists on saving Michael's daughter from embarrassing herself on the national TV show Fame or Shame, so they get into a studio bust-up and chase the presenter across town.
That little girl sat on my lap when she was 2 years old, and I swore to God that I would rip the fucking skin off anyone who fucking wronged her.
So contrary to our extremely negative impression of him, Trevor does have a heart and a capacity for nurturing other human beings. He's still engaging in violence, but with a positive purpose of sorts. And him throwing this guy to the floor by the throat is like a toned down variation of what he did to the biker. It had me wondering whether that was deliberate. The studio scene and Trevor making the TV presenter dance with his pants off while he films him were brilliantly scripted. They made me laugh harder than virtually every new comedy film I've seen in the past 5 years. The only equal comparison I can think of is Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street, And again, that's a movie that takes a criminal archetype character and blows her up to comedy proportions so large that the moral outrage of the humorless critics is drowned out by the laughter of the mass audience. And just like with certain types of cognitive behavioural phobia cures, embracing the funny side of Trevor diffuses our fear of him. Because fear and laughter are polar opposite emotions, it's rare that we feel both at the same time.
What's your problem, huh? Why aren't you scared of me?
There are two scenes in GTA 5's cutscenes where characters try to diffuse Trevor's violent impulse by verbally degrading themselves, like they're just giving him the sense of utter domination he seems to want, in the hope that it will spare them his violence.
I'm just a dumb A-list celebrity trying to entertain America, okay? I got a lot of stuff going on right now, dude, besides you trying to kill me. Now, I got multiple sexual harassment lawsuits, plus I'm an addict, all right? And I've relapsed. I can't stop jacking, dude. I jack it in traffic.
I ain't got a very big penis. Some girls laugh when they look at it.
And there's a moment here that I think is an appropriate introduction to our next Trevor analysis topic. He pulls his pants down, showing this guy his penis, and when they try to avert their eyes, he demands,
Look at me!
Trevor, throughout the game, is effectively shouting, "Look at me," to the game's audience because, whether we consciously realise it or not, one reason we choose to enter these gaming worlds is so that we can indulge in safe simulation form all the socially and morally unacceptable behaviours that we are unwilling to indulge in the real world. This parallel between my actions in the game and Trevor's actions in the cutscenes crept up on me. I was ignoring all driving safety rules out of impatience to reach the next gameplay goal, frequently knocking people down and randomly beating people up in the street for laughs. Even before I saw Trevor's first offensive cutscene, I'd already taken part in gaming world drug deals, shot and killed dozens if not hundreds of simulated people. It wasn't so much that I was becoming Trevor within the game as I was playing as the Trevor character. I already was him before he was introduced. The difference with the usual gaming experience is that Trevor's story wasn't presenting me with a narrative that allowed me to feel like I was the good guy. I began to feel like the game designers were using the game interface to reflect my own dark urges, turning my own TV monitor into a symbolic mirror where Trevor is my reflection, shouting,
Look at me!
Or more specifically, shouting, "Look at yourself." All Trevor's deplorable traits, greed, impatience, obnoxiousness, rage, selfishness, sexual aggression, bullying, and even violent sadism, those traits all exist within you, the gamer, at the level of subconscious urges, whether you want to admit it or not. And you express those urges in your dreams, the movies you choose to watch, and the video games you choose to play. And for all you know, you may even be expressing them in your daily life interactions with real people, but in watered down forms. If that is a message the game is intended, then it gets my seal of approval, because something I've noticed with human beings is that when they convince themselves that they're morally pure angels whose actions are always driven by the urge towards goodness, it often ends up serving as false justification for them acting quite similarly to Trevor. I've seen social justice and political campaigners from both sides of the phony political spectrum throwing insults, verbal threats, punches, and even bricks at other living, breathing human beings, just because those people hold political or social views that they personally disagree with. The Trevor in them coming out on display, but disguised behind a veil of supposed moral superiority. While I was writing this analysis, the story broke of 4 people torturing a mentally ill guy in America while shouting, "Fuck Trump" and "fuck white people." That's how dangerous a misplaced sense of moral superiority can be. And unfortunately, that's not an isolated case. Trevor personifies the dark side that is present, and usually suppressed, in all human beings. And, taking the real-world torture event that I just cited, perhaps the game's strongest moment of showing us our dark side is the famous torture sequence. Despite getting the Trevor character for the most part, I still felt really uncomfortable with this sequence. Trevor's previous bouts of murder and sadism were mostly cutscenes in which I was reduced to being an observer. But this time I had to take part and view the violence close up instead of high up behind the character. The game was putting me in the position of choosing an instrument of torture and then applying that instrument to a victim, in the toned down form of button pressing, of course. Despite the harmless CG nature of the scenario, I chose electric shocks initially because I considered it the least gory and the least likely to inflict permanent physical scarring and deformity. My second choice was waterboarding for the same reasons. Why did I even care? It's all just a simulation anyway. I cared because I wanted to keep my darkest urges suppressed. I didn't want to feel the guilt of choosing what I felt were the more sadistic torture options. I was struggling with myself, not the game. It can be argued that the game forced me to make these torture choices because I couldn't progress further in the storyline if I didn't, but I did have another choice: switch the game console off and never play GTA 5 again. So purely out of my desire to play the rest of the game, I accepted the sense of responsibility and, through Trevor, carried out the act. However, if the game had replaced the CG torture animation with actual actors giving convincing portrayals of the pain and suffering, then I probably would have switched the game off, and you'd be watching a very different kind of analysis here. And I think that if gamers were told that they had to actually commit these acts against a real living person before they could progress further in the game, then pretty much every single one of them, except extremely rare serial killer types, would walk away and never play the game again either. So personally, I think the game gives a very positive message with this scene. By making me feel uncomfortable with what is clearly a harmless simulation, it reassured me how strong my own emotional and intellectual barriers are in the real world, barriers that prevent me from engaging in these kinds of acts. The dialogue scene that follows, in which Trevor disobeys his FIB torture session instructor by letting the victim go, wasn't really necessary for me personally, because I already got the empathy for a CG character irony, but I'm glad it was there anyway. It makes clear the general anti-torture stance of the game designers, and it gives a critique of US intelligence torture techniques, being that waterboarding was one of the options. Trevor is telling the victim to go out and campaign against the use of torture and tell his story, in parallel with the game telling that same story to us. So I think of it as being similar to how animal rights activists show people horrific video footage of slaughterhouses, not to promote slaughter, but to raise awareness. It's a brilliantly conceived media campaign against torture, disguised within commercial video game packaging, so that it can reach the minds of millions. With regards to the specifics of Trevor's character, his post-torture monologue establishes two further points. First, it's a continuation of the revelation that Trevor has a compassionate side, and second, there's the point about the sadism being conducted for the emotional gratification of the people giving the order to torture, in this case the FIB character. Funny that there's been so little controversy over this guy, being that he obviously represents an FBI character. Personally, I found him to be more deplorable than Trevor, and I noticed that in the torture preparation, he pulls implements out of a big tool drawer and shows them to the victim. And the drawer has a Power Metal logo engraved on it. I wonder if that was a little hint about his motive of feeling power over the torture victim, because you know what? I couldn't find any such tool manufacturing company in my online searches, and there are many other examples in the game of fictitious brand names being used to make social statements. That point about Trevor being used as a tool of violent expression for another non-player character in the game is an overt example of a much more subliminal theme. As I've previously outlined, Trevor is a tool for our expression of suppressed urges, an external personification if you will, but he also acts as a mirror for the urges of other characters within the game and not just the FIB handler. At the base plotline level, he's like the dark alter ego of Michael, the supposedly reformed ex-gangster. He's all the things that Michael is trying not to be, and continuously Trevor taunts Michael about this, pointing out the cracks in his mask of social responsibility.
So Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I'm doing yoga and meditation. Tuesdays and Thursdays, hookers and sticking up joints, huh? You call me mad? Fuck, compared to you, I'm the sanest motherfucker I know. Yeah, sane.
But this mirroring of other characters' darker edges is present in certain incidental characters too. Here's a great example. A near psychotic woman is chastising a guy who she admits she only met a week ago.
I don't care what you say. Shut your mouth. Shut it. Shut. Just keep it shut. You know full well exactly what you didn't say. It's no good. Well, you can be surrounded by your young girls and your threesomes and your parties, and you will be miserable. You could have had it all with me. Well, fuck you. And I don't care that we just met last week, all right? Just stop looking at me. Don't look at me. Say something.
She's pretty aggressive, and like with a lot of hot-headed women who act this way in real life, the one thing that's stopping her from smashing the guy's face in is the simple fact that she's not as physically strong as a typical man. Actually, some women don't care and attack anyway, only to cry victim afterwards if the guy fights back. So thank fuck these kinds of women aren't as muscular as men. They would brutalise us. Anyway, she gives the guy grief, and Trevor steps in and does the thing that she wants to do. He knocks the guy out cold.
Say something! Oh, I wish you were dead, I really do.
And I love the little comedy touch of Trevor jumping so he can throw his full body weight into the punch.
Oh, I love you! Oh, let me take you away from all of this!
Trevor then declares his love, and the girl claims they have nothing in common, while giving a description of Trevor that totally matches her own personality.
Me? Me the psycho? No, you are the craziest fucking chick I've ever met! I love you!
You're thin! You're irrationally angry! Nothing you say makes any sense! You are completely have no control of your emotions! We have nothing in common!
Oh, baby, we're made for each other!
Prove it! On the bike! Now!
And possibly by coincidence, they're both wearing figure-revealing garments. Trevor then does what she was just doing to this guy. He stalks her, chasing her on a bicycle.
Just think of all the angry revenge sex!
I am not having sex with you!
So we've got that overall general mirroring thing again. Trevor as a representation of her dark stalker side. Other examples are more subtle, like when Trevor mirrors Franklin's Auntie's aggressive dialogue.
My mother's old dried up ass
Shut
sister.
the fuck up! Yeah, shut the fuck up!
Drywall.
Hey, we got some motherfucking buyer's remorse out here.
You can't fucking hustle a hustler!
Trevor as a personification of the hidden darkness in others also extends into the dark side of corporatism. In his ruthless financial ambition, Trevor talks of his activities as if it were an official business.
What about me?
You're CEO of Trevor Phillips Enterprises. Find us some business so that we can make some money.
We hear that Trevor Phillips Corporation is serious business. We pay good price.
Trevor Phillips Industries. Technical expertise, managerial innovations, unstoppable.
Oh, that's right.
So it's like he's a mirror of the underlying traits of big businessmen. In this scene, he mirrors the selfish psychoticness of the woman in the relationship and offers verbal criticism of big business.
I heard that those conferences are regular little fuckfest, huh? Can I come in?
I'd like you to leave right now!
Oh, yeah. Some serious corporate gangbanging going on, right? Yeah, with every executive and director of communications from here to Bangalore taking it left, right, and center in the name of team training.
Aside from all this reflection of negative traits embedded in the human condition that we tend to be in denial of, there are, in addition, aspects of Trevor that undoubtedly appeal. Mother issues aside, he's fearless in just about every situation. He's not shackled by shame or delusions that what he does is somehow for the greater good. He's a survivor who knows what he wants and goes for it without hesitation, and he says what he wants when he wants to say it without dressing it up in pretty words. In other words, he's got balls, attitude. He's his own man and he makes his own rules. And anyone who can't admit that that has its appeals is a fucking liar. I wasn't quite aware of this next point while playing GTA 5, but while preparing this character analysis, I came to an important realization. Though Trevor is like a split personality projection of our more immoral impulses, there are definite moral restrictions in how that character is written. He could have been written to be a lot more objectionable. From what I can see, Trevor has 3 behavioural no-go areas, and we'll explore the first 2 of them as a pair, because they sort of blend into each other. Given the emotional volatility of Trevor, his willingness to carry out the torture mission, and his tendency toward booze, it isn't beyond comprehension that such a person in real life would be prone to committing violent sexual assaults against one or both genders, or even of committing violence or sexual assault against children. But rape and child abuse are absolute no-go areas for Trevor in the overt storyline, and that's something I find fascinating and reassuring. Okay, now I'm going to go off on a conceptual monologue here about this stuff, so bear with me because the psychological concepts that I'm going to outline will quite specifically bring us back to the Trevor character. Most people, as far as I can tell, do not want to indulge in rape or child abuse fantasies, even if it's in the harmless environment of computer simulation, and I seriously doubt the game designers would want to indulge it either. I'm not just talking about their desire to keep the media criticism of the game mostly positive, because there are borderlines of controversy that become commercially damaging. I'm talking about the morality of the game designers. I don't think they wanted to go there. Given the average person's willingness to indulge and enjoy non-sexual violence and murder against other adults in video games and in the storylines of movies, our strict avoidance of sexual assault and child abuse in such media raises crucial questions about fantasy pathology. Shooting someone with a gun is actually a horrific thing to do. In my opinion, it's worse than a sexual assault because the physical pain of the injury is so severe, assuming it's not a shot to kill. The damage is permanent, and there's a good chance the victim's entire life and all their relationships and aspirations and their daily contributions to the world will come to an end. Not to mention the after effects on the lives of the bereaved. The basic act of beating someone up can be as physically damaging and traumatizing as rape, even more so in some cases. Yet we play tons of video games where we knock the hell out of people and we watch extremely violent martial arts movies. In a revealing verbal avoidance, we call these fantasy violence realms the action genre. But the word action is so vague that we could justifiably call sports games and racing games under the same banner, but we don't. In terms of fiction genres, we reserve the word action specifically for fantasies about violence and murder. We don't say, let's go watch a killing people movie. But strangely, we do refer to non-lethal violence video games more honestly as beat-em-ups. Maybe our willingness to be more frank about the latter is due to the moral cushion of not usually murdering people in those games. However, that's delusional too. In real life, people can actually die or end up permanently brain damaged from single-punch assaults. And many martial arts movies or beat-em-up games do actually involve killing as well. We're so comfortable with non-sexual violence and murder fantasy that it even exists in games marketed directly to young children. The form may be soft, cute and cuddly, but conceptually it's still killing. What I take from this is that we humans sort of trust ourselves to indulge non-sexual fantasies of violence and murder. We trust that we won't then feel compelled to reenact those fantasies externally. Or another possibility is that, due to the survivalist mechanisms of our evolution, violence and murder urges in humans are so strong that we can't switch them off, not even at the conscious level. As an added psychological safety mechanism, we have a preference for fiction narratives in which our expression of violence is framed by a good versus evil narrative in which the victims of our aggression in some way deserve what they get, as if it's they who are responsible for the brutality that we or the characters we identify with inflict upon them. Contrast all this with rape and sexual abuse fantasy pathology. It's well known that serial killers and serial rapists and predatory paedophiles virtually always are driven by years of unrestricted psychological fantasy. In other words, they've committed such forms of abuse so many times in their imaginations and with such intensity that they've effectively primed themselves to reenact those atrocities in the real world. Whereas most normal people restrict themselves to fantasizing about consensual, age-appropriate, or more specifically legal sex. And so consensual sex with an adult is what most normal people are compelled to pursue in real life, if they can find a partner who is willing. Maybe that's an uncomfortable truth about sexuality. Maybe our sexual fantasies have such a potent effect on our behaviour that we have to engage in a strict moral code of conduct even at the internal fantasy level. An interesting experiment to conduct purely from a research point of view would be to take people of different sexual orientations, including straight, gay and paedophilic, and to take people with specific sexual fetishes like shoes or lingerie, and have all those people each spend a few months deliberately adopting an internal sexual fantasy life that is in opposition to their usual preferences. What effect would this have? Could straight or gay people be permanently turned into bisexuals? Condition themselves to have violent sexual urges that would be illegal if acted out, and then find it difficult to control those urges because they've fantasized about them so much? My guess is that the participants would either refuse outright to indulge any sexual fantasy that they wouldn't want to enact in real life, or they would engage in the fantasy in some sort of watered down way and not tell the experimenter. But such an experiment is unlikely to occur because of the potential legal and moral repercussions, so I doubt we'll ever get to find out if people can really be conditioned in this way regarding their sexual urges. Despite this general tendency of normal adults in placing moral limits on what they fantasize about, there are many ways in which subconscious urges towards sexual violence, rape, and even paedophilia float to the surface. The domination-submission sex games between couples, which sometimes veer subtly into non-consensual abuse. Ever been severely bitten or scratched by a sexual partner in a way that you didn't want? Then there's the sexualized music videos with women dressed in school uniforms, or the way some parents dress their young children in sexually provocative ways. And there are the lies and other forms of psychological manipulation used to get people into bed, or even just plying them with drugs or alcohol to emotionally lubricate them for the encounter. Or there's the sense of glee we take from hearing that a deplorable criminal got raped in prison, and often we wish it upon them. I've heard several people openly express the desire, personally, to torture paedophiles, even sexually. In terms of non-sexual child abuse, what about all the shouting at, hitting, and the many forms of psychological manipulation of children committed by their parents and other surrounding adults? We see bits of that stuff on display in public, but that's the tip of the iceberg, and even the best researchers in the field can only guess at the scale of what lies beneath the public surface behind closed doors. All this brings us back to Trevor in GTA 5, and I don't know to what extent the game designers intended this, but he shows tendencies toward rape and child abuse without ever actually acting on it. The obvious one, which is used for great comedy value, is his allusions to homosexual abuse of other men.
I'm driving. You can jerk me off if I get bored. I'm joking. You can suck me off. Well, I gotta fuck someone. You want me to fuck you instead? Is that the problem here? Take off your pants, cowboy, all right? Let's fuck.
You think this is funny?
Get them off!
Such verbal exchanges aren't even out of the ordinary. When we tell someone, fuck you, as is heard by many characters in GTA 5, are we expressing a subtle desire to dominate the listener in an act of rape?
Hey, fuck you.
You know, I'm beginning to think that's exactly what you want to do. It's not legally fucking if you do not penetrate.
Shit, man!
Fuck is a sexual penetration word, and yet we use it so much in verbal conflict where sexuality shouldn't be an issue. What does it really mean to tell someone to fuck off? Does it mean stop raping me? And how often do we call other people cunts and dicks and arseholes, all body parts associated with sexual activity?
Fucking shit! Cunt! 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 Cunt!
There are other human body parts that tend to be disgusting and smelly, but we don't call people feet or armpits as an insult. Mutual sexual abuse terminology between adults is surprisingly common, but Trevor takes it a bit further than most of us.
I ain't no molester, Trevor.
Shut up before I molest you, all right?
There's this comical moment where he's desperately trying to intimidate a guy who, for some reason, just isn't scared.
Oh, I'm getting a semi. You know why I'm getting a semi, Cupcake? Huh? It's not because I want to fuck you. It's because you have been fucking me! And bang, 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 huh? Ah!
And there's this guy who he shows his penis to while showing us his dirty arse. And he makes the same guy massage his genitals.
I got a knot the size of a baseball in here, all right? Needs a little, loosening up, all right?
Oh.
Massage me, motherfucker! Good.
Trevor's hard at work, huh?
Massage!
No, I really
Do
don't.
you want me to get my dick out again?
No.
Does anyone want that?
No.
Despite his apparent desire to sexually dominate other men, Trevor is established as heterosexual in his trailer intro scene, and at various points in the game he is seen either crudely complimenting women's sexual appearance or expressing frustration with their disinterest in him.
You suck cock, but you don't eat meat. It don't make sense to me!
He hits on Franklin's auntie, and he comments on Amanda's new breasts.
Oh, I missed you. You used to be fatter. Nice new tits, by the way.
There might even be a little joke there about CGI breasts looking like artificial ones in the real world. He also has a couple of scenes involving a prop which he calls his Statue of Impotent Rage. I assume that's a giveaway hint that he's impotent himself and that much of his violent anger stems from that impotence. We do see him having sex, but as I mentioned earlier, it seems joyless. Can he actually finish the job at his own end? It seems Trevor is just plain old heterosexual, yet he commits no sexual assaults on women. He's happy to verbally insult them.
Food is a drug, and you're an addict. Oh, come on! Where's your sense of humor? Did you eat it?
And he does perform a bit of comical stalking of this woman, but she was acting like a stalker herself, so that's just a mirroring thing again. Instead, his sexual deviances are pretty much exclusively confined to symbolic rapes of other men. That's a clever move by the game designers because it gives Trevor that general sexual threat framing, but without giving the feminists ammunition to start frothing at the mouth and calling for the game to be banned, and saying it's pro-rapist, misogynistic and all that crap. Instead, the allegations of the game being misogynistic have been stupidly made on the basis that apparently the game shows women generally in a disrespectful light. Well, it does show some women as being aggressive and selfish, but hey, some women are actually like that. As is typical of many in the feminist movement, the misogyny accusation is blind to the simple fact that GTA 5 doesn't really show any social group in a respectful light. It's a comedic parody of the modern world's dark sides across many social groupings. Men are depicted as thieving, money-grabbing lowlives, and some of the men are under the thumb from their girlfriends, like this guy.
You're crap, Floyd! Crap! You're not a man at all. Bob's right about you.
Oh, who's Bob?
Teenagers in the game are lazy, shallow and self-absorbed. Millennials, as Trevor calls them. And that's certainly true a lot of the time in the real world.
But that would be the post-ironic use of the word cunt, both offensive and at the same time curiously anodyne. Hey, what the fuck?
God damn millennials!
Businessmen are basically corrupt gangsters in this game. The FBI or FIB are just as bad, and cops are faceless shooting targets. But if you're one of those people who only gives a shit about social justice for one social grouping, which is usually your own one, and fuck everyone else, then all that stuff will go over your head. The usual complaint is that the feminists want to see strong, intelligent women in games and movies, even though it's a simple, undeniable fact that men have basically physically evolved to be more muscular and more hormonally primed for violence than women. In this particular scene, the more extreme feminist types, the feminazis as they're mockingly called, are given what they want. An aggressive, business-suited woman in a position of authority oversees the torture of a man, takes part in that torture, and is about to symbolically rape him.
You think you're impenetrable? See how you feel with this is 18 inches deep inside. Get the lube. Actually, fuck the lube. Let's dry dock it.
Isn't that what the extreme elements in the feminist movement want? To punish and dominate the men that they hate so much? Well, here it is, and it's not a pretty sight, is it? Not even in a video game. But I've not heard much complaint about this torture scene. Regarding the sexual domination motive of torture, I noticed that, true to the game's very dark humour, when this poor fella gets rescued from one torture scenario only to find himself in an even worse one, there's a soft porn picture placed on one of the walls behind the torture equipment. It seems so out of place in this environment. A subliminal hint about sexual sadism, maybe? And I did notice that when the guy gets taken out of the building, he has a lot of blood over his groin. Sure, that could have dripped from the mouth injury from having his tooth pulled out. But, you know, maybe it's a sexual torture metaphor as well. Back to the depiction of women. Yes, the game has strippers and prostitutes and gold digger girlfriends, just like in real life, but Michael doesn't physically beat or otherwise abuse his wife even though she's screwing her yoga instructor, and he forgives her for it. Me, I'd be kicking her out the door. So who's the weak one in that marriage? His son, the male, is the fat, unattractive, introverted game addict, and his daughter is the gorgeous, sexy dancer. Misogyny my arse, this game is as critical of men as it is of women. As for Trevor, he has two storyline moments in which he is emotionally dominated by someone and breaks into tears. One is his domineering and emotionally manipulative mother.
Tell me, Trevor, are you gay?
No.
And the other is the kidnapping victim he falls in love with, who sort of becomes the mother he would prefer to have had.
Gasolina? No.
Going.
Have fun, boys.
Oh, I'm going. Make sure you
Don't stay out too late.
So even Trevor is being presented as the weak male, dominated in two different ways by women, one respectable, one not. Down in the ghetto, there are no girlfriend beatings or rapes depicted, and Franklin is nagged by his domineering auntie.
Hanging out with old men, ignoring your homies, acting all superior? Your mama will turn over in her grave, boy.
So I think Trevor himself has got the right response for those who moan that the game is misogynistic.
Hear I shout, we are women, have no doubt. We are women, we are free.
Shut the fuck up!
Incidentally, the double murder by Trevor was one of the game's highlight moments for me because it left me to fill in the blanks. Who attacked who first? How did Trevor not get shot? Were the deaths fast or slow? And given the extremely negative impression of Trevor already established, was there a sexual aspect of the attack? Whatever happened, if Trevor himself is so disturbed by it, then it must be awful. But I do like the allusion to Trevor's childhood. He says his father wasn't nice and then tells them they're not very nice either.
This is all I've got, all right? I had a tough upbringing. My daddy was not nice to me.
Taught me.
Fuck Bob! You people are not very fucking nice.
In other words, like with his childhood, he's faced with a domestic violence scenario, only this time he's big enough and strong enough to do something about it. So I love the way some of these themes have these multi-layered moralistic facets to them. This one can be perceived as Trevor being an absolute scumbag, or it can be perceived as Trevor facing the demons of his own past. Oh, last point before we move on. I mentioned that there's not just rape tendencies present in Trevor, but also child abuse tendencies. If I remember correctly, there are no children in the game at all, not even as bystanders. We can't have gamers driving around running over kids and babies, can we? Men and women, yes, but not kids. So where's the child abuse implication? Well, it's very subtle, and you might not agree with me on this, but I think it's present in how Trevor treats his buddies from the trailer park. They're smallish, puny guys who cower like kids whenever he's around. Their speech patterns are childlike, and after Trevor jokingly threatens Wade with sexual abuse, Wade says something we'd expect a child to say.
Jerk me off if I get bored. I'm joking. You can suck me off.
Are we gonna stop for ice cream?
It's like these characters are his abused children.
Find us some business so that we can make some money and tidy my shit up.
They're also male, and this is comically offset by the surprise moment of Michael's daughter Tracy being really happy to see Trevor, even though everyone else is terrified of him.
Trevor?
Two dads. Great.
Wow!
Very San Andreas.
What are you guys doing here?
He mildly insults Michael's son.
Jimmy, you used to be thinner, but can't blame you.
But when it comes to Tracy, Trevor's revenge against Michael motive is overtaken by a protective parenting impulse. So we have a dual dynamic, Trevor as the responsible and irresponsible parent. Oh, and with reference to children, Trevor acts like one when playing with his impotent rage action figures. I had to get that in somewhere. Alright, that rounds off the complex sexual predator and child abuse aspects of the Trevor character, the straight narrative no-go areas that are otherwise communicated in underhanded ways for those paying attention. But remember what I said earlier, that there are 3 no-go areas for Trevor's criminal impulse? Well, let's move on and explore the third one. The third behavioural no-go area for Trevor is racism, and on this front the game designers stick much closer to the no-go principle, as in they don't even put any sneaky suggestions of racism into Trevor's actions or dialogue. Quite the opposite in fact. They go to great lengths to absolutely ensure that Trevor cannot be perceived as overtly racist. For example, in a great comical moment, Trevor waltzes into the hood, looking to make friends with the African-American Franklin, who he's barely been introduced to. He tells 3 local women to shut the fuck up, and there's no repercussion. Yeah, try doing that in a real hood. He wants to hang out and commit crimes not just with Franklin, but his comical buddy Lamar, and he hits on Franklin's auntie. So he's getting down with the multiracial thing on a sexual attraction level too. The scene is arguably unrealistic on the social and race relations level because Trevor is in some ways a stereotypical trailer trash character. Being that racism is often perceived as being a general trait of so-called trailer trash southerners in America, the game designers could have included racism in Trevor's behaviour and then justifiably argued realism against any critical backlash. The same goes for the ghetto. Would gangster homies put up with a hillbilly waltzing into their neighbourhood and demanding to take part in local drug deals? I doubt it, but that very social unrealism gives the sequence humour and charm. I noticed that while the game is full of swearing, there are virtually no racial taunts, apart from African Americans calling each other nigger in their usual buddy way. Even when Trevor is the stranger and the only Caucasian taking part in a drug deal that goes wrong, we don't hear any remarks of, "Who the hell is this cracker?" or "Get your white ass out of here." Yet it's fairly clear that the area Trevor lives in represents the southern states of the US. In the game geography, the trailer park plot of land may be north of the Los Angeles symbolizing city, but it's right next to a body of water called the Alamo Sea. The real Alamo is in Texas, near the border with Mexico. So it's a very multiracial, multicultural game, comically stepping in line with the now common fiction media fantasy of a globalist world free of bigotry and social grouping boundaries. I mean, we've even got Michael, the older, privileged Caucasian, helping young African-American Franklin out of the slums. However, the game designers aren't stupid. They show too much social insight in other parts of the game to be ignorant of the unrealistic, multiracial and multicultural fantasy to which the central characters appear to conform. They do actually slip in some forms of bigotry that are generally deemed acceptable by the PC Brigade. There are little comments by some of the people on the street that Trevor bumps into.
Where you from, Bato?
It's none of your business, okay? Hey, it's a slight accent!
This motherfucker. Hey, what's cracking on me? What you doing around here, man?
And there are little quips about Canadians.
One thing I cannot stand, it's post-ironic hipsters.
If you don't like it, you can go back to Canada, dude!
Hey, so I grew up in Canada, huh? What's the big fucking deal? You fucking racist!
Another way they challenge these forms of acceptable bigotry is through parody. Trevor, the supposedly psychotic and socially irresponsible archetype, shows uncharacteristic politically correct restraint when he greets Franklin.
Oh, my N-word, huh? What's up, homie, huh? Oh.
So he can't even use the friendly greetings homie or nigger as in N-I-G-G-A, not the racial taunt nigger. He uses the PC phrase N-word, which is a stupid phrase for many reasons, one being that the word nigger isn't the only racial slur beginning with the letter N. And right after using the phrase, he calls Franklin a homie, not the H word.
Oh, my N-word, huh? What's up, homie, huh?
And he appropriately trips over the fence to the amusement of the African American. It's a great parody of how PC lingo fails to break down race relations boundaries, or fences in this case. And the later scene rounds off with an easy-to-miss follow-up joke. In Tarantino-esque comedy dialogue style, Lamar calls Caucasian Trevor a nigger as they're getting into the van.
Who is this fool, man? What is man, just come on. Who is this fool, man? What is man, just come on.
By the way, if you're wondering why I keep calling the characters African American and Caucasian instead of black and white, it's because I'm trying to break a bad language habit that society has taught me. People aren't divided into strict black and white skin colour boxes. Their skin colours are virtually always somewhere on the pinky orange through to dark brown colour palette, and with many shades in between. The terms black and white, in my opinion, are divisive terms that pit people against each other in us and them conflict, like chessboard pieces. But it's a difficult language habit to break when virtually everybody else continues to use and reinforce it, but I'm trying. So back to the game. One scene that hints at a more realistic awareness of social divisions is this bar scene. Trevor sits next to a hillbilly character who is wearing a t-shirt with guns and an American flag on it, with the word Patriot. And he has a US flag tied around his head, like his mind is wrapped in patriotism too. My take on this is that this old guy is communicating some of the traits that we would expect in Trailer Trash Trevor, if he were fully conforming to the hillbilly stereotype. Dirtiness and untidiness aside, his plain white t-shirt and the interior of his trailer are like a politically empty blank canvas. No signs of patriotism. In fact, at many points in the game, he voices open criticism of his own country.
Gotta be careful, buddy, all right? Because they are looking around these trains for illegals. And if you're mistaken, you'll be shot, amigo.
Very amusing.
Oh, the blood we spill for the security of this country. Our past indiscretions would be forgotten in a haze of patriotic fervor.
Who told you that? Did I tell you that?
The racist or xenophobic element is however present in the bar scene in a very mild form that serves only to embarrass the man expressing it. The same patriotic character who seems like the missing half of Trevor's social archetype mistakes the dialogue of the Oriental guys as being Spanish.
Censors Juan Fanla! You speak Spanish, speak it to each other!
Like with Franklin, there are no racial taunts given to these Oriental guys who visit Trailerland, not even when Trevor has a falling out with them and attacks one. Isn't it amazing that interracial violence is deemed okay to show in games and movies so long as the characters aren't calling each other racial names? Because slurs hurt a lot more than punches and bullets, right? Trevor even hits an African American guy with a chair in the TV studio scene. I'd be surprised if the game designers weren't aware of the potential racial interpretation when putting that sequence together. And the torture victim is a Hispanic guy, brutalized first by a Caucasian woman, then a Caucasian man via his Caucasian underling Trevor. But I guess people were too overwhelmed by the sadism of the scene to be bothered about any racial implication, which illustrates my point that physical violence is a much worse crime than a racial insult. It's interesting that of the game's 3 men characters who we play, the chances of the psychopathic one coming from a hillbilly background are probably no more likely than him coming from the inner city ghetto. Both are slums of sorts. But if Franklin had been the psychopath and Trevor the more self-controlled one, trying to break away from his socially deprived roots, then I've no doubt the game would have been branded racist. So isn't it telling that there's been very little critique of the game's negative depiction of hillbillies, trailer trash, or southerners? It's one of the many modern forms of bigotry that are deemed acceptable under the insanity of political correctness. I noticed an example of this here on British television many years ago. In this child abuse awareness TV commercial, a white guy played by an actual actor is seen abusing a young cartoon version of a child. The kid ends up being thrown down the stairs and presumably dies. It's a really powerful campaign ad and a clever way of showing the unshowable.
Up to? I just asked you what you're up to. Why do you make me do this? You dirty bastard! Get out! Guess it gets all you fucking want! Get out of here!
Funnily enough, it ties in with GTA 5's computer simulation of a torture sequence that wouldn't be marketable if real actors were shown. But I couldn't help notice the irony that it was deemed okay by the filmmakers and broadcasters to show a Caucasian guy engaging in these kinds of acts, and that nobody shouted racism in response to the ad. But if a darker-skinned British man or woman were cast as the abuser of their own child, then accusations of a racist promotion or negative stereotypes would be much more likely. Why didn't the filmmakers show a series of abuse incidents occurring in several households involving people of different ethnicities and cultural backgrounds? I'll tell you why. Because PC culture has persuaded us to accept the negative stereotyping of Caucasians, and Caucasian males in particular, as perfectly acceptable. I detect a little bit of this in GTA 5 as well. When it comes to the social problems of the inner city ghetto, the game takes a different approach to what it does with Trevor. In the same way that Trevor is a kind of dark alter ego of Michael, Franklin has an alter ego buddy named Lamar, who represents all the negative traits often associated with people in his social background. But the cutscene writing of Lamar doesn't dare go as far as it does with Trevor. Personally, I quite like the Lamar character. He's funny as hell in his dialogue, and I would like to have played him as a fourth character and see some cutscenes of his troubles and his background, but the game doesn't go there. It limits us to the uncontroversial Franklin character. Now, I was glad to see that GTA 5 went to great lengths to embrace modern anti-Caucasian and especially anti-hillbilly bigotry and twist it on its head to show it up for the idiocy that it is. Trevor is made to be so insane, so cruel, so off the leash, that he becomes laughable and ridiculous. Cigarette cartons and beer bottles are strewn around his trailer like feces, and he's so physically dirty he's like the human equivalent of a pig rolling in the mud. It's all a great way of countering a negative stereotype trend that PC arseholes approve of, or at least don't object to. The game takes control of that stereotype and blows it up to wildly unrealistic proportions. And as I said earlier in this analysis, our first impressions of Trevor as being pretty much evil to the core are gradually undone by the moments where he suddenly reveals a more nurturing and caring side, and the revelations of his childhood of psychological abuse by mother and probably physical abuse by father also give us some cause to question our hatred of the hillbilly stereotype. In other words, take your bigoted demonization of American Southerners and shove it. Okay folks, I'm going to wrap up the Trevor character analysis now with some broader points about how I hope he will affect the future of gaming. I'd like to give a shout out to the game writers for delivering a game narrative and dialogue that was more funny, entertaining and socially insightful than almost every new mainstream movie release that I've watched in the last 10 years. More than any other game character, Trevor has given me hope that video games can delve into worthwhile psychological territory that movies can't. And I base that hope on two things: the ability to make the gamer take part in the story and thus reflect on their own actions, and the scope that CG simulations give for exploring aspects of human behaviour that would be too distressing or too technically difficult to show with flesh and blood actors. So let's hope Trevor's not just a flash in the pan. If other game designers take inspiration from Trevor, perhaps they too can use game characters to challenge us with complex moral scenarios instead of the stupid black and white ones we usually get from games, movies and news media. Maybe they can show us aspects of ourselves we otherwise wouldn't notice. And maybe they can help smash stupid social, political and media trends as part of the wider effort toward human enlightenment and progression. And finally, a shout out to Stephen Ogg, who played Trevor's movements and dialogue. A fantastic job, well done. I watched a couple of interviews with Stephen while preparing this video, and I watched the bizarre GTA 5 Comes to Life video he starred in, and I have to say this guy knows how to convey insanity. I definitely prefer the CGI version of Trevor though, because I can get some distance from the intensity of Stephen's performance. And he looks like a cross between Clint Eastwood and Jack Nicholson, so I'd love to see him do a comedy version of The Shining or Dirty Harry. Okay, this has been my very first video game analysis and I really enjoyed making it. It went much deeper than I expected. I've got plenty more to say about GTA 5 and I've got some pretty good ideas for videos on the Elder Scrolls series too. So get over to my website creativelearning.com where you can find all the links to my online videos and articles and where you can order downloads of my huge back catalogue of offline media. Adios amigos.